Hi, my name is Aaron Gordon, and this is my persuasive speech on should we send additional monetary aid to Ukraine. The dangers of sending $53 billion in aid to Ukraine, including weapons that we cannot track, and they'll likely end up in Russian control anyways. I've seen firsthand how a lot of the federal aid is given out in war-torn countries, including Iraq and Afghanistan. A lot of times they were sent cratefuls of Crocs shoes, but they really didn't need. What they really needed was seeds to plant better crops so they could survive. I feel the U.S. as a nation shouldn't invest $53 billion into Ukraine. Instead, invest that money into American relief programs for families here in the United States. There are tons of families recovering from COVID, and more upcoming food shortages are likely to come. We're going to go over sending vast amounts of money and weapons to fund a proxy war with Russia again in history, while America can grow extremely poor. We'll go over COVID restrictions and how they slowed our infrastructure and still haven't caught up with the demand pre-COVID-19. We should send aid to Ukraine, but not more than the whole Russian military spends on their military every year. Arming an American proxy war. Funding a proxy war could lead to an actual war between the US and Russia and could possibly lead to World War III with NATO alliances. Neglecting to aid US citizens could also lead us into a civil war. According to Edmondson, the US is up to $54 billion in relief and weapons that we have sent to Ukraine. There is already news of upcoming food shortages due to the American inflation and everything from gas to baby formula. If these problems are not addressed, the citizens of this country will have nowhere to go because there will be no one bailing out the US. The US is currently experiencing a larger than usual homelessness epidemic. Families are finding their ways onto the streets more and more every day. With the loss of businesses shutting down and people afraid to go to work with surges of COVID-19 making resurgence, according to Adler, to effectively get families off the streets to end homelessness, it would cost about $20 billion a year. That's just to get us rolling in the direction. The numbers will go down after a couple of years. Put that into context to the $54 billion we sent to aid another country that we only have trade treaties for raw materials with. Ukraine is not part of any global treaties that we are obligated to stand in the defense of. Most of these decisions are put to vote with our own government by American people. Funding Ukraine could lead to war with Russia. We as a people didn't vote to be guardians of the world. We didn't intervene in Georgia when Russia invaded them, nor initially in Crimea. Initially to help with relief from lockdowns, President Biden promised Americans a lot of relief funds to help from hurting against restrictions and job losses, and he went back on his campaign promise. And Americans got far less money than what they were promised to help and relief from funds that were allocated. This just didn't happen overnight either. This has been a problem of neglect that has had time to mature to a full-blown crisis. Our damaged U.S. economy. We can sit by and watch Russia monopolize resources going into Ukraine. We are also not a global piggy bank. That's our tax money being sent to Ukraine. Funds that were meant to help repair and update our already crumbling infrastructure. We have real problems here in the U.S. that are spiraling out of control. The causes of this problem didn't just happen overnight. This has been a slow buildup of problems from COVID-19 lockdowns, our diminishing infrastructure from roads, fuel pipeline projects, and other projects that we need to keep our country running every day. There are now upcoming food shortages from lack of our supply lines even keeping up with the backlog deliveries on the ships, trade routes all over the world. People also aren't going to work like they used to either, not when inflation is up so high to even travel to work. Due to Putin's war, we're experiencing shortages of all the resources we were getting from Russia. Most of our fertilizers that farmers use to grow our huge crops in the Midwest come from Russia. Our natural gas is exported from Russia as well. Russia is supplying a third of the world's fuel requirements, fertilizers, and wheat production. war is called trade embargoes due to buying Russia's resources and further funding the war on Ukraine. The U.S. slowly over the years, in an attempt to be greener and lower pollution, stopped producing all these resources, and instead we just imported them from other countries to keep all the countries self-reliant on each other. It's self-assured determination. Russia felt they didn't need our support since they supplied most of the global resources. All this is slowly leading us to an ugly outcome that may result in a nuclear war with Ukraine and Russia. According to the article by Mainz, we are sending all kinds of weapons, anti-tank aircraft, to Ukraine. This will only lead to one conclusion: the escalation of the use of power. After we harden them, Russia could just use tactical nukes to destroy these weapons that we are sending them in the first place. I feel like the U.S. government leadership is responsible for most of this. They spent most of the past 7 years name-calling, mudslinging political officials, and standing for virtue than actually fixing any of the problems Americans face day to day. We shouldn't have shut down the Keystone Pipeline, at least until we had greener energy ready to take its place instead. We must rely on unstable countries for our energy needs. There are many things we can do every day as everyday citizens to affect global changes, and it starts by voting with your money. The U.S. should have split the amount of relief money it sent to Ukraine to send a message that they care for both concerns of the world and its citizens as well, without highlighting the U.S. as a major protagonist against Russia, but also saying that the U.S. cares about the concerns of its people. Ways we can help is voting with your money. Only shop and buy from companies that are businesses that are giving back to or helping people in your state or city. Also, companies that are helping with families that are losing their homes due to not being able to work during the lockdowns. Some solutions to you as a citizen are the simple ones. We can write letters to our senators, let our opinions be heard, or in the next section, we can vote for someone who will actually help and vet the promises that they do make on us. If they're the same old lying politicians, we need to get new blood in office. We don't have to vote on the same lines of party votes anymore. And as you can see here, these are the local areas where people here in your hometown every day become more and more homeless. So what can we do? Of all these things, I think we should invest in America, and us as a nation should not invest $54 billion in weapons and money into Ukraine. It is an act of war to Russia, and that money could help save American lives and get them off the streets during a pandemic of surging, new ever-coming diseases. Funding a proxy war with a nuclear-armed country is never a good idea, while neglecting its own nation's problems and peoples who are hurting and dying every day more and more. Understand what's causing these problems in our society, and we can make small changes in your life to stop the problems with you. Vote with your money and things you need to buy, and when the time comes, vote. Vote for better leadership that's going to hear our needs first. Don't just vote along the party lines, do your research, and vote for someone who is going to stand up for its citizens. And if you ever want to know just how bad things can get quickly with the fear of Russia overlooking with war and total nuclear annihilation, just talk to anyone who lived through or fought in the Cold War. And there's one angry bear you don't want to provoke into global warfare.